Welcome everyone. Today's session is to focus specifically on one high-impact strategy, using formative assessment in your classrooms. This is a widely accepted practice that is considered a cornerstone of teaching and has the highest results for improving student learning. Our norms today to engage as a learner and a practitioner, assume positive intent, and keep students at the center, honor time and voices. These norms will help us stay productive and efficient for today's professional learning session. Our purpose today is to implement high-quality assessments and improve outcomes for all students. Our agenda will focus on what's important to us, our current performance levels, and defining key concepts. We will also be engaging in structured activities. Towards the end, we will explicitly discuss implementation science and how we can implement these in our classrooms with actionable steps. Our learning attention today is to learn several evidence-based formative assessment practices to draw conclusions from student work samples. Our students' work can show us a lot, and our goal today is to be able to better decipher that work. We're focusing on a single actionable success criterion that addresses sustained change. This session will be successful if we can embed an evidence-based formative assessment strategy into lesson plans next week and have you share the results at our next meeting. At the end of the session, you'll be asked to use one of the strategies we talk about today and use it in your classroom. So why is formative assessment important to OHS? These graphs show our urgency to improve student achievement. Our ELA proficiency is 42% compared to the state's 57%. This unacceptable achievement gap is the need that our evidence-based practices today are designed to address. Our math proficiency is at 38% compared to the state's 48%. And our science proficiency is also 10% below the state level. For a town with a large population of low-income students, we're certainly doing well in some areas, but there's a glaring need to close this achievement gap. We must use these numbers to make our instruction more responsive to student learning needs. Research clearly shows that formative assessment is one of the highest impact EBPs for increasing achievement. Practices like this must have efficacy to back them up. Formative assessment is one of the most powerful levers for improving student learning. Assessment-driven instruction has been proven to have 20 to 40% higher gains in student learning outcomes. Implementing formative assessment practices into all of our classes is a tool that we will use to help close this achievement gap.
To me, formative assessment describes all those processes by which teachers and learners use information about student achievement to make adjustments to the students' learning that improve their achievement. So it's about using the information to adapt your teaching and adapt the work of the students to put the learning back on track, if you like, to make sure that the learning is proceeding in the right direction and to support that learning. So it's what happens when you don't just lecture students and rattle through the material until you get to the end and ask them if they've understood it okay. It's constantly making those adjustments. One of the ways I like to talk about it is just imagine what would happen if a pilot flew like many teachers assess. So I flew back from Seattle a few weeks ago. Just imagine what the pilot would have done. He would have flown east for 9 hours, and then after 9 hours he'd say it's time to land. So he'll put the plane down and he'll ask, is this London? And of course, even if it's not London, he says, well, everybody's got to get off because I've got to get onto the next journey. And that's exactly the way that we've assessed in the past. We teach students material, and at the end of that teaching, we find out if they learned it or not. And if they haven't, we say, too bad, because we're on to the next unit. So what formative assessment does is encourages teachers to take constant readings about where students are, just in the same way that a pilot takes constant readings about their position. And if the learning isn't proceeding as you'd planned, then you make adjustments. That's the essence, to me, of formative assessment. So the reason I think that formative assessment is the right focus is because assessment is the bridge between teaching and learning. It's only through assessment of some kind that you know whether what has been taught has been learned. And that's why I think this focus on this assessment process, minute by minute and day by day, not at the end of a sequence of learning, minute and day by day, allows teachers to reflect on their practice and make small steps in improving that practice in a more powerful way than anything we've seen before.
So what is formative assessment? It is an evidence-based practice and happens frequently during instruction time. As Willem says in the video, this is a constant happening in classrooms. The primary goal is to improve teaching by providing immediate and actionable feedback to the instructor and the student. The conclusions that we draw from the assessment, not just the assessment itself, is what makes it formative. This is unlike summative assessments. Formative assessments are usually for a low percentage of the grade, lower pressure, which induces higher risk-taking by students, and it happens on a much more frequent basis. This is an evidence-based practice, which differs from a research-based practice because it has efficacy to back it up. Research-based practices are more theoretical and they may not be true, but a formative assessment is an evidence-based practice, which means there's actual evidence and proof that this works, and that this is one of the strongest pillars that a teacher should use in their classroom. These are some examples of short cycle formative assessments that occur minute to minute or day to day. Many of you already use these in your classrooms right now. We use these tools to ensure that we hear from all students, not just frequent participators. Relying on a handful of students instead of all students can lead you to make instructional decisions because you're not getting the temperature of the entire room and you won't be getting the needs of the whole group, and that's what formative assessment is about analyzing needs. So this brings us into our first activity. This activity requires us to analyze evidence to gauge what is known, what's partially understood, and where errors remain. Assessment becomes formative when the evidence is actually used to adapt teaching work to meet learning needs. So the core purpose of this activity is to ensure that better evidence leads to better decisions, which will lead to better outcomes. In this activity, we will analyze student work and identify patterns, trends, and student needs. We'll discuss and ask questions about that student work to identify student needs. The structure of these instructions ensures that the assessment evidence is eventually used to adapt instruction. In this activity, we'll analyze student work that you have brought in with your group and draw conclusions about the student work data and to identify areas of need or areas for improvement. When you would go back to plan your lessons, you would have the student needs in mind when planning the next lessons. So in groups, you will have 45 minutes to complete steps 1 to 6 posted here and identify works that really demonstrate a student need. What about the work shows you that student need? I will let you guys get to it. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to analyze each other's student work. How was it helpful to our understanding and how could it have been better? Talk quickly amongst your group, and then I'll have one group share out an answer. What was one student need you identified in your work? What about that student work led you to that conclusion? Let's start with English. Any English teachers want to share? Math, history, science, world language? Okay, quickly, good break. Here, we'll take a 5-minute break to go stretch your legs, use the bathroom. We still have some coffee and refreshments, courtesy of Oxford's Casual Dining, right outside. Okay, welcome back. This brings us to activity 2. In this activity, we're going to read a fragment of Teaching Secondary Students to Write Effectively, recommendation 3, and you're going to scan over some student assessment examples. You're going to complete the 4A's activity, which is assumptions, argue, agree, and act, and you'll develop an action plan for your classroom. Towards the end, we will focus on the act component to translate our theoretical learning into targeted action steps. So, you're going to take 10 minutes to read the article individually and highlight any key points. Write notes and or identify moves you could do in your classroom. After the 10 minutes, we're going to give you a chance to, again, get up and stretch your legs, walk around, and answer the questions on the large poster boards you see posted around the room. you're going to write your answer below each question posed. The questions are, what assumptions does the author of the text hold? What do you agree with the text? What do you want to argue with the text? Or what parts of the text do you want to aspire to or act upon? Ten minutes later, another 10 minutes later. Read teachers' answers, facilitate small discussion about that. This moves us on to training, from training to practice. So implementation is defined here as translating evidence-based practices like formative assessment into routine high-quality use. If we reframe teaching as a continuous process rather than a linear process, our students can reach proficiency in advanced levels in math, ELA, and science. Effective teaching must be a continuous process and occurs in the school, not just theory. Again, as Willem says, this is a constant happening, minute by minute, day by day, to see what your students are actually learning in your classrooms. So what we're going to ask from you, we're going to ask you, what is one instructional move you can commit to using in your classroom before our next meeting? Be prepared to share next meeting why you did it, what the student work demonstrated, and any instructional changes you may have made. The step is essential because assessment is the bridge between teaching and learning. And remember, when choosing your instructional move, use one of the evidence-based practices we use today in one of the two activities instead of research-based. Again, evidence-based practices are backed by lots of evidence. They are tried and true. Research-based practices are more theoretical. They can be less reliable and lead to undesirable outcomes. So we conclude the content portion of our presentation. We hope that you leave today understanding that better evidence supports better decisions that can lead to better learning, and that you feel like you can bring some of these moves into your teaching practice. An assessment, guys, is not just for students. It's for us administrators, too. Please take a minute to complete this survey so we can have some assessment feedback and some assessment data on our presentation today and how we can best help you. And here are the references for this presentation.